In Australia, what you have is a form of accountability which is top-down, vertical, test-based. Every kid in Year 3, Year 5, Year 7 and Year 9 sits in May every year for literacy and numeracy test, and we have a public website called My School, and on that every school's results are compared with the national average, the national thresholds, and then there's this other formula where they developed what they call ICSIA, which is a statistical measure. It's called the Index of Community Socio-Educational Advantage, but it's a measure of the socio-economic status of a community. And so what they do is measure the performance of every school against what they call 60 statistically similar schools. Now it's well motivated, it's trying to take account of different background, but basically what it does is then almost imply that schools serving poor communities, kids can only do better than other similar kids in other types of schools. And there's a sort of fatalism, I think, to social inequality. So what I would want to argue is that we need to have another mode of vertical accountability, and which is more pushing the gaze, I suppose, from schools, teachers and their communities back up to the system, which is looking down in this test-based vertical top-down, and work in and around what the Americans call opportunity to learn standards. So Linda Darling-Hammond's written a lot about this, and what she would argue is that schools and their communities, the teachers, the principals, their leaders, have got a right to demand from the legislators, the politicians, the policymakers inside ministries and bureaucracies, to demand of them the necessary resources to achieve the sorts of things that in that top-down accountability with target setting and so on, the system's demanding of them. So it's trying to get a voice going back the other way and saying, you've got responsibilities, it's not just us. But we're arguing for horizontal modes of accountability, and somehow schools and their communities and schools, somehow expressing what counts and what ought to count, and what are the things we want to achieve in this school, what are our purposes, what are our goals, and how could we say in an annual review of our performance that we've met these, and that might be through case studies, narratives, testaments given by some students, teachers, the community and we're working on a project where we're trying to do that by formally constructing a body which we've called a Learning Commission. And what's been interesting in the submissions we've had to that Learning Commission in an attempt to create a sort of horizontal mode of accountability is employers just weren't focused on literacy and numeracy. They actually talked about they wanted kids who had a sense of responsibility, were mature to be able to do jobs. It wasn't just, and they thought the schools were doing a reasonable job there. We had a group of Indigenous women. Their choice of school in this region came from the word of mouth in the Indigenous community about which principal, which schools, which teachers had made attempts to link to the Indigenous community, respected Indigenous people, their knowledges, cultures, and they thought that should be something that the school should be praised for. And we've got huge support from the parents and the teachers and the principals, because they think the top-down vertical accountability washes away all the other great things they're doing. They feel it's reducing everything to literacy and numeracy and driving up test scores, and whether that's improving the education, and in a way it's not allowing the strengthening of relationships with community and so on.